Hare Krishna. I welcome all of you for the session that I'll be having today on the second chapter of the Gita. Just to quickly summarize the last session that I had, just so that we can stay in track. The last chapter, the first chapter of the Gita, is just an introductory chapter to the whole of the Gita. There's nothing philosophical in the first chapter. It's more or less an observation of the battlefield of Kurukshetra. It begins with Dhritarashtra asking a question to his secretary, Sanjaya, inquiring about the situation in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. What did his sons and the sons of Pandu do? And then we see how Duryodhan he narrates what he sees in the battlefield to his guru Dronacharya. And then after that, when Arjuna requests Krishna to take him ahead and see those people with whom he has to contend, this is where the gist of the Gita is. Here, Arjuna doesn't see his enemies the way Duryodhan sees. Duryodhan just saw the people he had to contend with as his enemies. He didn't see them anything more than that. But on the other hand, Arjuna saw them as his relatives, and he requests Krishna to kindly not engage him in such a ghastly warfare. And Arjuna also presents his points to Krishna. Arjuna gives four major reasons trying to convince Krishna that the war must not be fought. The first reason Arjuna gives to Krishna, the first reason that Arjuna gives is on the basis of his natural compassion. No sane man can, fight against one's own relatives. And the second reason that Arjuna gives is of his personal enjoyment. He thought, should this war be waged just so that we could all be the kings of this world? Just for our sake, should so many people sacrifice their lives? Here, Arjuna doesn't understand that the war wasn't being fought to enthrone the Pandavas, but it was being fought on the superior will of Krishna. It was to satisfy Krishna's plan. This is evident from the later chapters. The third reason Arjuna gives to not fight is that of the destruction of family traditions. This is a long cause and effect sequence that I had told last time, where Arjuna says that if this war takes place, then it would lead to the complete ruination of the world. And the last reason Arjuna gives is that of accumulating papa. Arjuna is worried that if he engaged in this warfare, instead of doing anything good, this war would actually send him to eternal hell. So Arjuna was worried about this. With this, the first chapter ends. And let us see how the second chapter begins today. I've made a small presentation just so that all of you won't miss out some of the crucial points. In case the presentation doesn't work, just send me a message. I'll look into it immediately. So I guess the presentation is working. So I'll just be narrating two shlokas from the Gita Mahatmya, which which says about the glory of the Gita. Last time also I had done this, but somehow the presentation wasn't there. So you can see here, Gita Shastra Midam Punyam Ya Patet Prayataf Puman Vishnu Padam Avapnoti Bhaya Shokadi Varjitaha. Here it is said that one who recites with devotion the Bhagavad Gita will attain to a holy abode such as Vaikunta, which is always free from the mundane qualities based on fear and lamentation. Just a minute. Yeah, I guess the PPT is on. Yes. So I'll read this again. Gita Shastra Midam Punyam Ya Patet Prayatav Puman Vishnu Padam Avapnoti Bhaya Shokadi Varjitaha. The shloka said that anyone who recites with devotion the Bhagavad Gita will attain to a holy abode such as Vaikunta, which is always free from the mundane qualities based on Shoka and Bhaya. And in the next shloka, it says, Gita Dhyayana Shilasya Pranayama Parasya Cha Naiva Santihi Papani Purva Janma Kritani Cha. This says that if one reads Bhagavad Gita very sincerely, with all seriousness, then by the grace of the Supreme Lord Krishna, the reactions of his past misdeeds will not act upon him. So, Bhagavad Gita is a transcendental literature. Just by reading the Bhagavad Gita, many reactions that we would have accumulated due to our past actions, all of that is nullified. So, that is why it is stressed that one must try and understand the message of Gita. So, with this, we'll begin the first shloka of the second chapter. So, again, continuing, Arjuna is not yet done with his arguments. He continues to give his arguments. Let's see how it unfolds. So, the second chapter begins with Sanjaya saying, Tam tata kripaya vishtam ashru purnaku lekshanam. Vishidantam idam vakyam uvacha madhusudanaha. Sanjaya says, Krishna saw Arjuna with his eyes full of tears, and Arjuna was overwhelmed with compassion. Seeing such a situation of Arjuna, Krishna spoke something. So let us see what Krishna spoke. So I have missed those. I have not captured those shlokas, otherwise it would have been too lengthy. So basically, Krishna chastises Arjuna. Krishna immediately calls Arjuna a fool, and he says, you're mourning for that which is not worthy of grief. Basically, he tells Arjuna that what you're lamenting for is not worthy of any lamentation. So, and then Arjuna begins to give again different kinds of arguments to Krishna, trying to support his argument that he must not fight. So, Arjuna says, how can he kill a respectable superior like Bhishma? Bhishma was like his own father. Dronacharya was like his guru. So Arjuna says, it's not possible for me to fight and kill someone like Bhishma who is so close and superior to me. And then he says, it is better to beg and live in this world than to kill one's own respectable elders. So Arjuna says, it's better to beg and live in this world. And then he says, suppose we won this war, then all our material gains would be tainted with their blood. It wouldn't be clean. It would always be tainted with their blood. And then Arjuna says he doesn't know what is better for him, to either fight or to not fight. He is in such a state of confusion. So, having given all his arguments, finally, Arjuna is in the state of confusion. And in this state of confusion, seeing the next sloka, in the seventh sloka, Arjuna says, Karpanya doshopahata swabhavaha prichami tvam dharma sammuda chetaha yatreyaha syan nishchitam bruhi tanme shishyaste aham shadi mam tvam prapannam. Arjuna says, I am completely confused about my duty and have lost all composure because of weakness. In this condition, I am asking you to tell me clearly what is best for me. Now I am your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. So here Arjuna uses the word karpanya. The word karpanya basically is referring to the word kripana. The word kripana can be translated into English as a miser, a miserly person. So Arjuna is considering himself to be a miser. Why is he considering himself like that? Because he has the ability and potential to fight, but he isn't utilizing that. Just like a person, if he has wealth and if he doesn't utilize it for his own comforts, then the person is called a miser. Similarly, Arjuna considers himself as a miser and he is in a state of total confusion. He doesn't know what has to be done and what he shouldn't be doing. So in such a state, you can see I've highlighted the word in the Sanskrit shloka, Shishya. He surrenders unto Krishna. This is a very crucial shloka in the second chapter of Gita, because only after Arjuna surrenders unto Krishna does Krishna begin to instruct him on spiritual subject matters. So this is a very, very crucial shloka. So let us see what is the next shloka. Next shloka, Krishna begins to, immediately after Arjuna surrenders, Krishna begins to, give his spiritual instructions. And the first instruction that Krishna gives to Arjuna is that you are not this body, you are something different from this material physical body. Let us try and understand the different perspectives and views that Krishna gives on this idea. Not exactly an idea, it is a reality that we are not this body, but something beyond this body. This is a little technical, so please pay attention, and it's not very difficult. Krishna says, Natva aham jatunasam, Natvam neme janadipaha, Nachayvana bhavishyamaha sarve vayam ataf param. Krishna says, never was there a time when I referring to Krishna is speaking this shloka. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you refers to Arjuna here, nor all these kings, referring to all the kings who have assembled in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. So Krishna is saying that never was there a time when he, Krishna or Arjuna or all the kings, never was there a time when they did not exist. And never will there be a time in the future when they would cease to exist. So here Krishna is bringing out the point that they are eternal by nature, that they did exist in the past, they are existing now, and they will continue to exist in the future. So this shows the continuity of existence. In the next shloka, Krishna says, because Arjuna was overwhelmed with compassion and he had fear and he was in anxiety. So here Krishna gives a very nice instruction that is applicable to all of us. Krishna says, Matra sparshastu kaunteyaha shitoshna sukha dukkadaha agama paino anityah stam tatikshasva bharata. So Krishna says, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Just like right now we are into the summer season and it rained in Bangalore, probably all places yesterday. So now it's a little cool, but otherwise summer is very hot. So when it's summer, we think it should be, when is winter coming? It would be so nice if it was cool right now. And when it is really cool, we wonder when would the warm, when could we feel the warmth of summer again? So our perception is always oscillating. So Krishna says happiness and distress in one's life can be compared to that of the seasons of summer and winter. Summer doesn't last forever. And similarly, neither does winter. It keeps coming and going according to its own nature. Similarly, the happiness and distress that we experience in our life is not permanent. It comes and goes according to its own accord. So, in such situations, Krishna advises us and Arjuna to tolerate. Titikshva. The word titikshava means to tolerate. Krishna advises, please tolerate. Now I'll give you a very fine understanding of this shloka. You see, the word Krishna has used here is that we experience different kinds of situations based on our sense perception, which means the problem is not with the changing seasons, it's not with the summer or the winter season. It is with my design, my bodily design. My body can't tolerate the summer. Or rather, our bodies cannot tolerate the summer. And neither can our bodies tolerate extreme winter, which means the problem is not out there. The problem is in my current situation right now. It's in our situation. This body is the problem. It is not the external that's the problem. The body is the problem. So we'll discuss on this further as we proceed. And then Krishna says, "Na jayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavita vana bhuyaha ajo nityaha shashvato ayam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire." This is another very important shloka that Krishna reveals in the Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna says, "For the soul there is never birth nor death. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing, undying, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain." I want all of you to visualize yourself as being this spirit soul that Krishna is speaking about. We are that spirit soul. And us, the spirit souls, for us there is no birth nor death. We didn't take birth when this body took its birth. It's only the body that took its birth, but not the soul within us. Because right before these shlokas, Krishna said, "Never was there a time when I, you, or these things existed. And neither will there be a time in the future when we shall cease to exist." So here Krishna is revealing that we are different from this body. The Atma, the soul within us, is eternal by nature. For that soul, there is no birth nor death. It is eternal in existence. So, just we can just ponder over a thought. You can all visualize yourself as you can visualize that you are existing 500 years in the past, you are existing 1 million years ago, you are existing a trillion years ago. We were there all those times. But right now, we do not have any memory of it. But Shastra say that we did exist. Now comes one more very, very important shloka. Krishna says, Vasamshi jirnani yata vihaya, navani grihanati naroparani, tata sharirani vihaya jirnani, anyani samyati navani dehi. The word Vasamsi means garments. So here Krishna is giving an analogy, a comparison. He says, just as a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, similarly the soul accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. Suppose you have been wearing a cloth which was your favorite cloth. You wore it for such a long period of time that it finally tore apart. Then what do? We just purchase another one or we just change our clothes. So similarly, Krishna says when this body is no longer in a state where the Atma or the soul can reside, which means when we become old, when we become invalid, when this body is not in its full potential, when it wears out, Krishna says the Atma leaves this body and accepts a new body. So here Krishna gives this wonderful analogy of the changing of dresses. So the Atma changes bodies just like it changes dresses. I think I missed out one shloka. I'll read it out for you. Krishna says, Dehi nosmin yata dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tata dehantara praptihi dhiras tatra na muhyati. So Krishna says in this shloka that this is a little technical shloka. Krishna says there are two things. One is the deha and the other one is the dehi. The word deha, we know the word deha in Hindi also. The word deha means body. The word dehi refers to the one who resides within the body. So Krishna brings out two separate, entities. One is of the body and one is of the person who resides within the body, which is the Atma. So Krishna says, in this shloka, Dehi nosmin yata dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara, that we all have passed through these three phases in our life, or some of us may be passing through some of these phases. One is that of kaumaram. Kaumaram means youth, kaumara, and then comes yavana. Yavana refers to the youthhood, and then the final stage, which is jara or old age. So Krishna says that just as we have passed from childhood to youth, and in the future we shall pass on to old age, at the time of death we shall similarly enter another body. In this analogy, there are two important points that we can pick up. You see, when we were all small, we didn't look the way we look right now, isn't it? We looked different. In fact, that body doesn't even exist anymore. We would have been only this big, and our parents would have been carrying us on their laps. So that body of ours doesn't exist anymore. We have changed. So that was the time when we were young. But you see, when we were young and when we turned a little older, say we were in our youth, say when we were 20 years old, the body completely changed again. But you see, from this sloka, we get to know that something within us survived this change. While everything connected with this body went on changing, I won't look, or none of us will look the same 10 years from now. We won't look the same 20 years from now. We are in a state of constant flux. We are always changing. But something within us is always remaining the same, even though the body is always changing. So here Krishna says that the thing that doesn't change within us is our identity, our individuality. When I was 5 years old, I still knew that I was that same person. Even now, I know that I was that same person when I was 5 years old. My identity as Mr. Such and Such hasn't changed, though the bodies have changed. I still identify myself with that body. So, my identity, my consciousness, my awareness, my individuality, this always remains the same even though the bodies go on changing, which means the identity or that Atma which we are, it can survive the change of the bodies. So here Krishna says, just the way you survived the change of your body, Krishna says, similarly, when death comes, you will continue to exist. You will just accept another body. So this is uh, the first instruction we can pick out from this shloka. And the second very crucial instruction is that Krishna proves in this shloka that we are not this body. Because the body went on changing, but the identity remained the same. So Krishna proves here that we are something different from this body. This body is a vessel that is carrying this Atma. This body is a dress. Like just previously, Krishna gave the analogy of changing dresses. So here Krishna gives this very crucial and important instruction about the Atma. Back to our presentation. So this is about, you can see the shloka number, it is 2.31. I have jumped a little ahead because almost 25 shlokas Krishna tries to explain about the position of the Atma, that how the Atma is different from this body. This you could refer for yourself. I've only picked some few shlokas due to the shortage of time. Now, having said all this about how we are different from this body, finally Arjuna is given another kind of instruction now. Now Krishna inspires Arjuna based on his nature of being a Kshatriya. So here Krishna says, Swadharmam api chaveksha na vikampitum arhasi dharmadi yuddha shreyonyata kshatriyasya na vidyate. So here Krishna says, considering your specific duty as a Kshatriya, you should know that there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles. And so there is no need for hesitation. So here Krishna inspires Arjuna to fight on the basis of religious principles. He reminds Arjuna, oh Arjuna, you're a Kshatriya. Your duty is to fight. You must not fade away from your duty. So Krishna inspires Arjuna here to perform his duty as a Kshatriya. And in the next shloka, Krishna says, Ata chetvam imam dharmyam sangramam na karishyasi. Tataha swadharma kirtischa hitva papam avapsyasi. So Krishna instructs Arjuna, if however you do not fight this religious war, then you will certainly incur sins for neglecting your duties and thus lose your reputation as a fighter. So here Krishna tells Arjuna that if you do not engage in this religious warfare, uh, now here the word religious war is used. Please do not use this word religious war in the modern sense where we see people fighting on the name of religion. This is not that kind of religious war. The word used here is dharma. There is no real equivalent for the word dharma in English. There are many words in Sanskrit that don't have their English equivalents. So here the word religious war is not referring to the war that is fought on the basis of religion the way we see in the modern times. This is something else. We shall explore and understand this maybe in the coming sessions. So here Krishna instructs Arjuna that if he doesn't engage himself in this war, if he doesn't do his duty as a Kshatriya, then he would incur sins for his actions, for neglecting his duty. So now if you can recall, in the first chapter, when Arjuna had given 4 reasons to not fight, one of the reasons that Arjuna gave was that he feared incurring sinful reactions. But here in this shloka, Krishna nullifies his argument, saying that you're thinking that by not fighting, you're doing some great punya and that you're protecting yourself from papa. But that's not really so. Here, Krishna says that by not engaging in warfare, you are going to actually incur sins because you are neglecting your duty. So, Krishna, he reminds Arjuna that this is not what you should be doing. And then he goes on to say, Krishna says that if he fought this war and if he won the war, then he would win a unrivaled kingdom, which is Hastinapur. And in case suppose he didn't win the battle, which means suppose the Pandavas were killed, then Arjuna would say that they would all ascend to heaven. So both the ways it was a win-win situation for Arjuna. So Krishna inspires Arjuna to get up and to fight. And then he goes on to say that if he ran away from the battlefield, or rather if he gave up the war, then people would describe him in unkind words. The great generals who had great respect and honor for Arjuna, they would scorn his ability. They would call him a coward. And then Krishna goes on to say that it is better to die than to be called by this, unkind words as a coward and so on. So Krishna says infamy is better than death. So, even in the duty point of view, Krishna tries to inspire Arjuna to fight. So, until now, basically, there were only 2 topics in the second chapter, until now, 2.33. Krishna first gave Arjuna the instruction on the difference between the body and the spirit. And Krishna told Arjuna that you are that spirit soul, you have nothing to do with this body. And then now, what we are seeing is that Krishna gives Arjuna the instruction that you must fight on the basis of your duties as a Kshatriya. So, with this, the first 2 sections of the second chapter ends. And we all know that Bhagavad Gita is a yoga shastra, which means in the Gita, Krishna explains different kinds of yogas. Just to give you a small info, the word yoga is used for the first time in the Bhagavad Gita in this shloka, 2.39, the 39th shloka of the Bhagavad Gita. So here Krishna tells Arjuna that now I am going to explain to you about yoga. Not really 2.39, it's from 2.40. So Krishna says, Esha te bihita sankye buddhi yoga imam srunu. Buddhya yukto yaya partha karma bandham prahasyasi. So Krishna tells, until now I have declared to you the analytical knowledge of Sankhya philosophy. Basically, what Krishna explained about Atma, that Atma is eternal, it doesn't take birth, it doesn't die, it can't be killed, it can't be uh, uh, burnt by any weapons, and almost 25 slokas, all that is basically Sankhya philosophy. So Krishna says that till now I have described the Sankhya philosophy unto you. And then now Krishna says, now I am going to explain to you about the knowledge of yoga, whereby one works without fruitive results. O son of Pritha, the son of Pritha is Arjuna. Kunti's another name was Pritha. Therefore, Arjuna is known as Partha. We all have heard this word, Partha Sarathi. So, another name of Arjuna is Partha because his mother's name was Pritha. So, here Krishna addresses Arjuna, O son of Pritha, because you act, when you act by such intelligence, you can free yourself from the bondage of works. So you can see I have highlighted the Sanskrit word buddhya. So here Krishna inspires Arjuna to use his intelligence, or rather the word buddhi-yoga. Krishna inspires Arjuna to be on the path of buddhi-yoga so that karma bandham prahasyasi, you can free yourself from the reactions of your work. Arjuna was worried that if he engaged in this ghastly warfare, then he would incur a lot of reactions for his acts. But here Krishna tells that if you act in a particular way, then I'm going to now instruct you. Then for such an act, there are no reactions. So then you may wonder what that act is. So Krishna is going to explain that in the future shlokas. So basically, the word which is used here is buddhi yoga, which means the art, the right way of performing action. The word buddhi yoga can also be used to represent karma yoga and bhakti yoga as well. Any shloka that we see in the Bhagavad Gita shouldn't be seen on its own standing. It must be seen in connection with the entire spirit of the message of Gita. Suppose someone analyzed and read only this shloka of the Gita. It's a very confusing shloka. But then, as we read the entire Bhagavad Gita, we see that all shlokas are in connection with each other. They are not independent of the others. So, first time when we read the Gita, it may sound a little confusing and we may tend to understand something else. But once we have read the entire Gita, and then when we begin to read it again and again, then we can actually connect the dots and see that whatever is being said here is in connection with the shlokas of the other chapters. So, that is possible only when we study the Gita. So, you can see I have made a small comparison here. This is verse number 2.39, which we just read out right now. Now, I'm jumping to the 10th sloka of the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna uses the similar word buddhi yoga again. So, here Krishna says, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. So here Krishna says, to those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. So here Krishna says, satata. Satata means always. Yukta. Yukta means connected. So bhajatam. The word bhajatam actually means bhakti. So Krishna tells, Priti Purvakam. Preeti Purvakam, with Preeti. Preeti means love. So here Krishna tells those who bhajatam, those who do bhajan. Now again, when I use the word bhajan, please don't. Uh, one may tend to think that bhajan means, singing and not that. Bhajan has a very deep word. I shall explain this in the future shlokas, future sessions. So here Krishna says, those who constantly worship me, always, satata, with love, priti. Then Krishna tells dadami. Dadami in Sanskrit means to give. So Krishna says, I give them buddhi. Buddhi means intelligence by which they can come to me. So you see, this whole shloka is centered around worship. It is centered around love. It is centered around Krishna promising the devotee that he or she would definitely come back to him. This is a shloka centered around bhakti. So we must be in line with the complete spirit of the Gita. So here when Krishna says that I'm going to now speak to you about buddhi yoga, it's basically referring to bhakti yoga. This is one more shloka where Krishna uses the word buddhi. This is in the final chapter of the word, the Bhagavad Gita, the 18th chapter, where Krishna says, Tesham satata yuktanam. Okay, sorry. I think I didn't change all the shlokas. Anyways, Krishna says here, Machchitta sarva durgani mat prasada tarishyasi. Atathetvam ahankaram na srosyam na vinangshyasi. So Krishna tells, in all activities just depend upon me and work always under my protection. In such devotional service, be fully conscious of me. So Krishna says that in all of one's actions, one must always be conscious of Krishna. There must never be a time where one is not conscious of Krishna. So, Chetasa Sarva Karmani, Mai Sanyasya Matparaha, Buddhi Yogam Upashritya. Krishna uses this word, Buddhi Yogam Upashritya. The word Ashrita, Ashraya, means to take shelter. So, Krishna again brings out this shloka, or rather this word, Buddhi Yoga, which he used in the second chapter, the chapter that we are going through right now, in the 18th chapter, where he says, Buddhi yoga mupasritya machitta satatam bhava. He says, you must always take shelter of me in buddhi, and in such way you must always be conscious of me and engage engage in your duties or perform your work. So this is what Krishna says. So now jumping back to the second chapter again, I think we have just another 15 minutes to go. So here Krishna says, these are, I will skip the shlokas, I'll just read the translation. Here Krishna says that if you engage yourself on this path of buddhi yoga, then what happens? Krishna says that in this endeavor, or rather on this path of buddhi yoga, there is no loss or diminution. And a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. I'll give you a very simple example. You see, the words loss and diminution is used in this shloka. When our life ends, we don't carry anything with us in our journey ahead. When this life ends, when we die, and when we have to accept another body based on our karma, we don't carry anything with us, not even this body. Even the body is left behind. Only the Atma goes ahead. Whatever we may have achieved in our lives, recognition, fame, name, power, prestige, wealth, positions, relations, and what not, all of that has to be left behind when death comes. And again, we begin our lives from scratch. I can't claim that, you see, I was such and such person in my past life or all that. It is all immaterial. But on the other hand, here Krishna promises Arjuna that if you endeavor to be on this path of buddhi yoga, there is no loss or diminution on your gain. For example, suppose you followed the principle of bhakti yoga or karma yoga that is explained in the Gita, then Krishna promises that the gain that you have attained or the benefits that you have attained from it is eternal. It never diminishes and neither is it lost. Suppose you got, say, 10 credits for your action in karma or buddhi yoga or bhakti yoga. Then Krishna says, if this life ends, the credits that you have attained doesn't end with this life. It endures and it always remains as it is. It never diminishes. It doesn't become 9, 8, 7. It is always 10. And it is not lost. Therefore, Krishna says here, a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. Now, you may ask me, why is Krishna using this word Mahato Bhayat? Bhaya means fear. Now, uh, the word Bhaya is used from Krishna's perspective, not our perspective. We may have many Bhayas in our life, but in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that the greatest fear of life is that of Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi, which is birth, death, old age, and disease. Basically, death. You see, this life that we all have attained, none of us chose the way we are right now, isn't it? The way we are right now. We didn't choose to take birth in, say, if I took birth in Bangalore, then I didn't choose to take birth here. I didn't choose to look like this. I didn't choose to have the parents I have. I didn't choose to endure the situations that I have to go through in my life. None of that is under my jurisdiction. It is all as if it's predestined. Having said all this, if I ask you a question, what are you going to be in your next life? We have no clue, isn't it? We have no control over it. But in our society, in our current situation, we can see a wide, a wide spectrum of situations around us, isn't it? Someone is poor, someone is rich, someone is healthy, someone is not healthy, someone is underprivileged, someone has to take birth in a city like Gaza, or someone has to take birth in Ukraine on what not, we don't know. So, in that way, it is really fearful as to what we are going to become in our next life. But here, Krishna promises that if you act on this path of yoga, these credits will always protect you during your time of need. Now, again, like I said, each sloka must not be viewed independent of the complete spirit of the Gita. In the 8th chapter of the Gita, Krishna says that Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram. If you think of me at the time of your death, Krishna tells if we think of Krishna at the time of our death, Krishna promises that we will attain him. So, practicing yoga gives us a greater advantage of thinking of Krishna at the time of our death. So, let us see the next sloka on buddhi yoga again. Karmajam buddhi yukta hi phalam tyaktva manishinaha janma bandha vinirmuktaha padam gachanti anamayam. So here Krishna says, again I've highlighted the word buddhi in Sanskrit. Krishna says the wise engaged in devotional service, buddhi yoga, they take refuge in the Lord, in Lord Krishna, and free themselves from the cycle of birth and death, which is Janma Bandha, Vinir Muktaha. Mukta means to free oneself. Janma Bandha refers to the cycle of birth and death. How do they do that? By renouncing the fruits of action in the material world. In this way, they can attain that state beyond all miseries. So now you see here, Krishna is promising three things, or rather, there are 3 points in this shloka. What is that? When we engage ourselves in bhakti yoga, in devotional service, in buddhi yoga, taking shelter of the Supreme Lord, just like in that shloka I showed you from 18th chapter, Chetasa Sarva Karmani Mai Sanyasya Matparaha, where Krishna says that if you take shelter of me in buddhi yoga, then you will be freed from the cycle of birth and death. So, similarly, in this chapter also, in the second chapter, Krishna explains the same point that if we practice buddhi yoga or bhakti yoga, we can free ourselves from the cycle of birth and death. And padam gachanti anamayam. Pada means that position. Gachanti in Sanskrit means to go. Anamayam means one is freed from all sins. So Krishna says that by practicing buddhi yoga, one can attain that supreme state of existence which is free from all sins and miseries. So now you may wonder, what is this state of existence referring to? This Krishna explains in the last shloka of the Gita. I will come to that. So now, till now, we saw Krishna explaining the difference between Atma and spirit, Atma and the body, and then he inspires Arjuna to fight on the basis of his duty as a Kshatriya. And then Krishna introduces him into the concept of buddhi yoga, where he tells that you perform buddhi yoga. Now, Arjuna asks a question. He asks a question: how do you identify a person who is practicing, or rather has perfected his yoga? So Arjuna says, Stita pragnasya kabasha samadhi stasya keshava stitadihi kim prabhasheta kim asita vrajeta kim. What are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak and what is his language? How does he sit and how does he walk? So basically, Arjuna, this is not a literal question that Arjuna is asking. It is, uh, you can say, a metaphor. Not really a metaphor, because he's not really concerned about how they walk, talk, or sit. He's basically trying to understand the symptoms of the person whose consciousness is merged in transcendence. In simple words, Arjuna is trying to understand the nature of a self realized person, the nature of a person who has attained perfection in yoga. Arjuna is trying to understand what are the symptoms of such a person. Now, I will again speak something significant of the second chapter. You see, the second chapter contains the entire message of the Bhagavad Gita. The second chapter contains the entire message of the Gita, right from chapter 1 to 18. So the second chapter is a little intense. From the third chapter onwards, Arjuna begins to ask Krishna certain questions. The questions he asks are based on this second chapter. It is as if Arjuna didn't understand what Krishna explained. And therefore, from chapter 3 to chapter 17 is an explanation to the second chapter of the Gita. I'll repeat once again. The second chapter contains the entire message of the Gita. Therefore, it is a little intense. And the second chapter is explained from the third to the 17th chapter of the Gita. So you can see, second chapter is again divided into another 15 chapters, 3 to 17. And then the 18th chapter of the Gita is the summary of the entire Bhagavad Gita, or rather the previous 17 chapters. So, many words that are used in the second chapter cannot be comprehended immediately. It can only be understood as we read and understand the Gita, because the second chapter, like I said, is the summary of the entire Bhagavad Gita. So here Arjuna is asking his question: how does one identify a person who is situated in transcendence? So Krishna says, Prajahati yada kaman sarvan kaman manogatan. Krishna tells that person who has completely given up all of one's material desires, that person is said to be situated in transcendence. And he gives many more different kinds of instructions. Krishna says, for such a person, that person doesn't lament if anything good happens to him or if something bad happens to him. He doesn't hanker for anything, neither does he lament for anything that he loses. So Krishna gives different kinds of symptoms for such a person. Such a person is not elated when there is happiness, and he is not disturbed in spite of the miseries. He is free from fear, free from anger, and free from attachment. And then Krishna goes on to say, such a person does not rejoice when he obtains good, nor does he lament when he obtains evil. He is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. I recommend you to refer to the Bhagavad Gita. It is right after this sloka 2.55 onwards. Basically, Krishna is telling Arjuna that such a person, he is disconnected from this world. Though he lives here, he is not connected with this world. Because all of us, we exist in this world and we experience duality here. Duality in the form of happiness and distress, pleasure and pain, wealth and poverty, health and say some kind of disease. There is always a duality that exists in this world. But this person is beyond all dualities because he doesn't identify himself with this body. If you remember, just in the previous shloka, when Krishna explained the uh, the analogy of changing seasons, that summer is not forever, winter is not forever. Similarly, happiness is not forever, and distress is not forever. And in such situations, one must only tolerate. So I had said that perception arises on our bodily design. It has nothing to do with the outside. Today, because we have identified ourselves with something else, with something that we are not, we undergo all the miseries in our life. For example, if there is a drama happening and uh, we have to take the role of different people, where one is a king, one is a queen, and there is a criminal who has to be punished. So, because the criminal is going to be punished, that criminal may experience fear, lamentation, anxiety, and all that. But if the person knows that he is only playing a drama, he has nothing to do with that identity or role play of a criminal, his life is something else. He has his real life outside. He has nothing to do with the drama. It's only for the time being. And in that consciousness, if he plays the drama, then he's very sure that even if the so called king in the drama punishes me, I don't have to undergo any of the pain there because it's, after all, just a drama. So, similarly, a person who is situated in transcendence, he is beyond this material existence. He has nothing to do here. So then Krishna gives a very important shloka, an instruction. Krishna says, Tani sarvani samyamya yukta asita matparaha. Vashehi yasya indriyani tasya pragna pratishtita. How do we know whether a person has fixed himself up in yoga or is a person of steady intelligence? How do we know whether a person is intelligent? This word intelligent is used in terms of spiritual understanding, not in terms of the material understanding, not material intelligence, PhD or scholarship, not that kind of intelligence. This is in terms of spiritual intelligence. So here Krishna tells one who restrains his senses and fixes his consciousness upon me is known as a man of steady intelligence. So here two things are mentioned. One is controlling one's senses, and the second one is fixing one's consciousness upon Krishna. Such a person is known to be of steady intelligence. Now here comes a very scientific cause and effect cycle that Krishna is giving. Here Krishna says, you know how a person loses his intelligence. How does all that begin? So Krishna says it all begins with contemplation on the object of the senses. What are the objects of our senses? We have five senses. And then we have three internal senses: mind, intelligence, and ego. The object of our eyes is form, what we see around us. The object of our nose is the smell, say something fragrant or something like that. So when we contemplate on something that is an object of our senses, Krishna says we develop attachment towards it. And from such attachment, lust develops. And from lust, anger arises. Just to give you an example, suppose you watched a very nice advertisement, say the IPL is going on right now, and you watched an exciting advertisement where a cricketer or a star is promoting some product. So what happens? You're contemplating on the object of your sense. Maybe it is an eatable or say a soft drink like Pepsi or something like that. You contemplate on it. And then what happens? We haven't tasted, say it is product ABC. I haven't tasted it. But just because I looked at it, I develop some kind of attachment towards it. I think within myself, why don't I go and experience it? So I develop lust towards it. And when this lust is not fulfilled, Krishna says one develops anger. I gave a very basic understanding of this product being marketed. Actually, this world is filled with sense objects and sense objects of varieties, sense objects for our mind, intelligence, ego, and all our panchendriya, for our eyes, for our tongue, and all that. So Krishna says when we do not fulfill, or rather when we fail to fulfill our lust, anger arises. And from this anger, sammoha means illusion. You know, when a person is angry, he or she doesn't think what she talks, what she does. They are in a state of illusion. They may end up even quarreling with one's own relatives, just like how Duryodhan is in anger and he has lost his intelligence. He fails to see what is good for him and what is bad for him. So he is in a state of illusion. So here Krishna says, from anger arises illusion. And from illusion arises bewilderment, which means when we are in illusion, we lose our memory. We fail to see. Just like Duryodhana failed to see his own relatives standing in front of him. He forgot that they were their own relatives. So one's memory is lost, and once the memory is lost, next the CEO, the intelligence is lost. So we fail to discern what is right, what is wrong. or rather, our conscience becomes corrupted. Our ethics, our morality, our rationale becomes corrupted. And in such a situation, Krishna says, Pranashyati. Pranashyati means Nashyati. Nash means we fall down into the cycle of birth and death. So we just have another two shlokas to go. So now one may say, how do we control how do we control our senses? So Krishna says here, he gives the analogy of the ocean. We all have experienced, at least sometimes we would have seen the rivers merge into the ocean. You would have seen great many rivers, just like it is said that the Brahmaputra that enters the Bay of Bengal is so wide. Brahmaputra is so wide that it runs into kilometers. That's the width of that river. But does such a volume of water that flows into the ocean, does it cause any impact on the ocean? Actually, it doesn't cause really any visible impact, isn't it? The ocean is as if still. So here the shloka says that we must become like that samudra. We must become like that ocean. And when we are like that ocean, though numerous rivers enter into us, numerous rivers of happiness, distress, desires, and what not. If we are like that samudra, then Krishna says that we will never be disturbed. Because no matter 100 Brahmaputras enter into the ocean always remains still because it is complete in itself. So here Krishna says that we must fill ourselves with spirituality, and only then Shanti. Krishna says that only then we can attain Shanti. Shanti means peace. Only when we are full in ourselves. Just like another example, if a person had a really great meal, then after that, if you try to tempt him with something, the person won't budge, isn't it? Because he's already full. So we have to fill ourselves with spirituality. So this is the last sloka of the chapter. Here Krishna says, Esha Brahmi Stiti Partha Nainam Prapya Vimohyati Sthitwasya Mantakalepi Brahma Nirvanam Richati. Krishna says, a person who is situated like this, Sthitaha, Sthita means situated. Brahmi means spiritually situated. Krishna says, even at the hour of death, one can enter into the kingdom of God. So, Krishna promises here that if we take to this path of yoga, then we can enter into the kingdom of God. So, in my next, because this was a very long chapter, 72 shlokas, I couldn't complete or rather explain many of the crucial points here. The next chapter would be that of Karma Yoga. That is a relatively short chapter. In this chapter, in the third chapter, which would be the next chapter, I will give more understanding on the word yoga, about what yoga really means, and the different kinds of yoga that Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita. I shall explain all of that. So I thank all of you for joining today. To get a better understanding, I recommend all of you to read the Bhagavad Gita. So in that way, we can stay in flow. Hare Krishna.